Gary Lineker beat HMRC's 4.9 million case. Right, I promised you this one. Gary Lineker, the BBC's highest paid presenter, match of the day, the crisps, the lot. And for the best part of a decade, HMRC chased him for 4.9 million quid. The headlines wrote themselves. Multi-millionaire presenter, tax avoidance case. You can picture the comment sections. Yes, but the headlines got wrong. Almost everything. Lineker won. Then HMRC appealed. Then HMRC gave up. And the number actually in dispute by the end wasn't 4.9 million, it was about 300,000. Stay with us, because if you invoice anyone through your own company, this case is about you. Subscribe if you haven't. This channel covers what the headlines get wrong every week. And this one's a masterclass. IR35 is the rule that taxes you like an employee if your freelance setup is really a disguised job. Start with what HMRC was actually arguing. IR35, the intermediaries legislation, the rule that says if you work through your own company, but the reality of the relationship looks like employment, they control your hours, you can't send a substitute, the work keeps coming regardless, then HMRC can tax you like an employee, full income tax, full national insurance. The company wrapper gets ignored. HMRC looked at Lineker's work for the BBC from 2013 and BT Sport from 2015 and said, that's employment in everything but name. Pay up. And here's the first thing that makes this case unusual. Most IR35 cases involve a personal service company, a limited company with one director. Lineker didn't have one. He worked through Gary Lineker Media, a partnership under the Partnership Act 1890 between him and his then wife, Danielle Bucks. Not a company, a partnership, the sort of arrangement most accountants would call old-fashioned. 1890, in fact. February 2023, First Tier Tax Tribunal, Judge John Brooks. The hearing takes 3 days. The decision lands on the 28th of March 2023, and it's brutal in its simplicity. Because Gary Lineker Media was a partnership, not a company, Lineker had signed every contract himself as a partner, which means there were direct contracts between Lineker and the BBC and Lineker and BT Sport. And IR35 only applies when there's an intermediary in between. That's literally its name, the intermediaries legislation. Because the word direct contracts, the legislation does not and cannot, as a matter of law, apply. Cannot, as a matter of law. Not on balance, not weighing the factors. The legal equivalent of the referee saying the match never even kicked off. The 4.9 million was never really the number. Lineker had already paid income tax on this income, personally, through the partnership. What was actually left in dispute, once you net it all off, was the difference in national insurance, roughly 300,000 to 400,000 across 5 years. 4.9 million in the headlines, a national insurance difference in reality. He'd paid his tax, the fight was about which type. Type Lineker or HMRC in the comments, who did you believe before this video? Be honest, I read every single one and I answer every single one. You might think that's the end. A judge says cannot, as a matter of law, you'd take the hint. But HMRC appealed. June 2023, straight to the Upper Tribunal. And then, 18 months later, days before the hearing, December 2024, they withdrew, settled. No press release, no apology, the terms confidential. 8 years, give or take, from the first inquiry letter to the quiet settlement against a man with the resources to fight back and a structure that almost by accident happened to be legally watertight. That's the part of this story I need you to sit with. Lineker could afford 8 years of tax counsel. Most company directors can't. HMRC knows that. The process is the punishment, and they'll run it to the final whistle. So what actually decides an IR35 case when there is an intermediary in the way? 3 things, and they're decades old. Control. Do they decide when, where, and how you work? Substitution. Could you genuinely send someone else? Mutuality. Must they offer you work and must you accept it? That's the triangle. Every presenter case you've seen in the news, the wins, the losses, turns on those 3. Same sofa, opposite verdicts, and the difference is never the celebrity, it's the paperwork and the working practices underneath. Lineker escaped the triangle entirely because of his structure. Now, I'm not telling you that a partnership is a magic IR35 cloak, because it isn't. But what worked here was specific to broadcasting contracts signed personally. What I'm telling you is this: the structure you choose and the contracts you sign decide these cases before any judge does. The winners, contracts reviewed before the inquiry, working practices that match the paper. The losers, standard contracts, never read, practices that contradict every clause in them. If you're invoicing through a limited company right now, when did anyone last actually read your contracts against your working reality? Not when you set up, now, because HMRC doesn't write to ask how you're getting on. The letter, when it comes, is the kickoff. One more thing before we finish. Lineker's name turned up somewhere else in this channel's stories. He was an investor in the ingenious film partnerships alongside Beckham and Rooney. Nobody escaped the 2000s entirely. That full story, the scheme, the court battles, and what it cost a knighthood is coming very soon. Here's the takeaway. Lineker won because his structure and his contracts matched reality, before anyone came asking. That's not luck, that's the whole game. And that's the boring, defensible kind of planning we do, the kind every one of our clients runs on. Not a scheme, not a clever wheeze that detonates in 3 years, just a structure HMRC reads and moves straight past. If you want your own structure and contracts reviewed the legal way before HMRC ever starts the clock, apply for a review at apply.ctprivateoffice.com. The link's on screen, in the description, and in the pinned comment. Give us a like if you enjoyed this video. I appreciate you watching.